Welcome to week 7 of Accounting 330. Today's lecture is going to go over the 8 objectives for this week. Objective 1 is to identify a government's basic financial statements. There are 3 financial statements that are required, or basic financial statements. 1 is the government-wide financial statements, 2 is the fund financial statements, and 3 is notes to the financial statements. Objective 2 is understanding the format and content of the fund financial statement. In the government-wide financial statements, there are 2: statement of net position and statement of activities. For the fund financial statements, there are 3: a balance sheet, statement of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balance on the GAAP basis, and 3, statement of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balances, budget and actual, presented on a budgetary basis for the general fund and for each other major special revenue fund with a legally adopted annual budget. Objective 3 is understanding the concept and content of required supplementary information, or RSI. RSI is data, typically schedules, trend tables, and statistical data that are required by GAAP to be presented along with the basic financial statements. However, RSI is not audited, and thus an opinion on its fair presentation is not rendered. The GASB has established 2 broad types of RSI for governmental entities: Management's Decisions and Analysis, or MD&A, and Other Required Supplement Information, RSI. Number 4, identify a government's major fund and how to prepare its fund statements. Major fund reporting is used for government's funds and the enterprise funds. Fund type reporting is used for the internal service fund and the fiduciary funds, distinguishing program revenues from general revenues. Major funds are reported separately in certain fund types. The fund financial statements for governmental funds and for enterprise funds are required to report each major governmental fund and each major enterprise fund in a separate column. Internal Service Fund, or ISF, and all fiduciary funds must be reported only by fund type on the basic financial statements. Major fund statement format, as illustrated in 13-2 and 13-3 of our book. There are 4 items that has to be in a major fund statement. 1 is a column for the general fund. 2 is a column for each major fund of the other governmental funds. 3, a single column for all non-major governmental funds combined, and 4, a total column. Objective number 5, understanding unique reporting provisions for infrastructure capital assets. Recall from prior chapters that GASB permits governments that meet certain conditions to use a modified approach to account for infrastructure. Governments that choose this alternative do not report depreciation expense on infrastructure assets such as streets and roads. Instead, all costs incurred to maintain and preserve the infrastructure assets are expensed. Only costs incurred to add to the capacity of infrastructure assets are capitalized. Objective 6. Understand the required information components of the MD&A. The final aspect of the reporting requirements of Statement 34, MD&A, is required supplementary information that is presented before the financial statements. RSI normally follows the financial statements and the notes. However, the purpose of the MD&A is to introduce the government's basic financial statements and to provide an analytical overview of the government's activities. Given these purposes, the GASB requires the MD&A to precede the financial statements. The analysis of the government's financial activities in the MD&A is to be based on current known facts, decisions, or conditions. It is not a forecast. Its purpose is to help users access whether the government's financial position has improved or deteriorated during the year. Statements 34 and number 37 identify 8 specific areas to be covered in the MD&A. These areas are listed and discussed in illustration 13-15 of our book. The MD&A is not permitted to address additional topics. Some excellent MD&As are the state of Florida, the city of Carrollton, Texas, and the state of North Carolina. There are other ones out there if you want to just go online and look for them. We also recommend that you review the electronic versions of their CAFRs, which are on their website. We also recommend that you find other CAFRs in particular interest to you on the local government's website and to review its MD&A. Objective number 7. Understand the type of notes to the financial statements required for governments. The notes for the basic financial statements of a government unit are an integral part of statements. The notes provide information that are necessary for fair presentation of each of the various entities reported in a government's financial statements. The notes in a typical report are quite extensive, often as long as 25 to 50 pages, and contain significant information. The GISB identified numerous notes that is considered essential to fair presentation of the basic financial statements for all governments, and many other notes that should be presented when applicable. Most of these are identified in illustration 13-4 of our book. The distinctions among the notes in each category are not clear because of 1. Some notes categorized as essential do not apply to all governments and thus may not be presented. And 2. All pertinent notes presented should be essential to fair presentation of the basic financial statements. Apparently, those notes listed as essential to fair presentation are thought to be applicable for the overwhelming majority of governments. The GISB also states that the list of notes in illustration 13.4 is not exhaustive, and is not intended to replace professional judgment. Finally, the GISB emphasizes that the notes should not be cluttered with unnecessary disclosures. Objective number 8 is understanding the reporting requirements for special purpose governments. Some governments are not required to present all the basic financial statements required for a general purpose government such as a state or a city, whereas some special purpose governments such as school districts typically serve several functions and may have both governmental and business type activities. Others do not. Some special purpose governments such as airports, authorities, and utility districts may only have enterprise operation. A government sole business type activities only has to present the proprietary fund financial statements. Government-wide financial statements, government fund financial statements, and fiduciary fund financial statements are not required. Likewise, an entity that is solely fiduciary in nature would only present the fiduciary fund financial statements. In every case, the MD&A, notes to the financial statement, and any other appropriate RSI notes must be included. Similarly, if a government has only governmental activities, the government would present governmental fund financial statements and government-wide financial statements, but proprietary fund financial statements and fiduciary fund financial statements are not required. This covers our 8 objectives for this week. If you have any questions on what our objectives are, please give me a call or email me. My phone number is 801-867-9681. If you have any questions about the homework, again, please call me or email me. And I'm here to help you, and I hope you guys have a great week.